This is episode 12 of Solfawn, Blood and Brine. Halen did not knock. That was the first cruelty. The second was that he opened the door without apology and let daylight into the room. Apple made a sound from beneath his blanket that might have been language several generations before civilization got hold of it. Sebastian, in the other bed, flung one arm across his face and groaned as though stabbed. The room was small, low-ceilinged, and smelled of wood smoke, damp wool, and regret. 2 beds, 1 chest, 1 chair, a pitcher of water on the washstand. A shuttered window Halen had now opened with unnecessary decisiveness, allowing gray Dunmere light to spill across the floorboards and stab directly into Apple's skull. "Close it," Apple rasped. "No," Halen said. Sebastian shifted under his blanket. "Halen, if you have ever held affection for either of us, you will extinguish the sun. It is almost noon." Apple opened one eye. That was a mistake. The world tilted, sharpened, and pulsed. He shut it again. "Noon is a rumor. It is not." Sebastian groaned. "Why does my hair hurt?" "Because you tried to drink Dunmere's customs into submission," Halen said. Apple pulled the blanket over his head. "I was performing culture. You were pulled off a bar stool by your tail after telling Oren the sugar cube had spoken to you." Apple considered this through the pounding in his skull. "That sounds like something sugar would do." Halen's heavy steps crossed the room. Then came the sound of wood scraping. Sebastian lowered his arm enough to see. "What are you doing?" Halen set one stone foot against the leg of Sebastian's bed and shoved. The bed lurched. Sebastian clutched the mattress with both hands. "God's below." Apple's ears flattened beneath the blanket. "Halen," Sebastian said, with the formal desperation of a man petitioning a court, "I am wounded." "You are drunk." "I was drunk. I am now injured by aftermath." Halen turned to Apple's bed. Apple sensed it before it happened. "No," Apple said. Halen kicked the bed. Apple bounced, tangled in the blanket, and rolled hard against the wall. A sharp white pain rang through his head. "I am dead," he said. "You are not. I am speaking from beyond. You are speaking from under a blanket." Sebastian sat up halfway, then froze, as if his body had reported the consequences of that decision all at once. His long golden hair hung loose around his face in a glorious ruin. One eye was more open than the other. "What emergency," he asked carefully, "requires us to suffer upright?" Halen's expression did not soften. "Wynn has not returned." That settled into the room. Not immediately. The hangovers fought it. Pain and nausea and resentment stood in front of the words for a moment, blocking their force. Then the meaning stepped around them. Apple pulled the blanket down. "He never came back?" "No." Sebastian sat fully upright, then regretted it with visible sincerity. "From Edda's, so far as we know." Apple rubbed both hands over his face. His mouth tasted like herbs, smoke, sugar, and something that might have once been courage. "Maybe he is asleep somewhere." Halen looked at him. Apple sighed. "Yes, I hear it." "He said he would return," Halen said. "He did not." Sebastian pushed himself to the edge of the bed. "How long have you been awake?" "Since before dawn. And you waited until noon?" "I checked the common room, the yard, the apothecary from outside." Apple looked at him sharply. "From outside? The shop was closed. That seems bad. It may be ordinary. It seems bad when Wynn is inside the ordinary." Sebastian reached for his boots and missed them the first time. "We should go." "Yes," Halen said. "Which requires you to stand." Sebastian stared at the boots. Apple rolled off the bed and landed on all fours. The impact traveled directly through his bones and into his skull. He hissed. "Quiet bite," he muttered. The hand crossbow lay on the chest beside his folded gambeson, its leather straps neatly arranged. Apple did not remember arranging them. He suspected Halen. Halen had also cleaned mud from the boots. That made being angry at him more difficult. Apple dressed slowly. Every buckle was louder than necessary, every strap resisted. The reinforced panels of his gambeson pressed against his ribs, and for a moment he resented Wynne for stitching them well. Then he remembered Wynne had not returned. He buckled faster. Sebastian was worse. He moved with the caution of an elderly priest carrying soup through a battlefield. He washed his face in the basin and then stood gripping. "I may never drink again," he said. Apple tied quiet bite at his hip. "You said that after the second mug. I was prophetic. You said it before the third." Prophets are often ignored. Halen opened the door. Downstairs, Apple's stomach turned at the word. "Is there food?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. Porridge." Apple stopped. Halen looked back. "It will help." That is what people say before medicine or suffering. Sometimes both. The common room of the fabulous tankard looked different by day. Less mythical, more sticky. The hearth still burned, but lower. Smoke stained the beams. Morning light, gray and unkind, entered through thick bottle glass windows and revealed the floor in all its crimes. Tables had been wiped down, but not forgiven. A few early drinkers sat hunched over mugs with the steady discipline of professionals. Someone snored in a corner beneath a cloak. Tina stood behind the bar, cleaning a tankard with a cloth and the expression of a woman who had seen every possible version of human weakness and found most of them poorly organized. She looked up as Apple and Sebastian descended. "Look what the spirits rejected," she said. Apple winced at the volume of her existence. Sebastian attempted dignity. "Good morning, Tina. It's afternoon. Then I have survived longer than expected." She snorted and set down the tankard. "You want porridge." Sebastian sat very carefully at a table near Halen. "I want mercy. Not on the menu." Apple climbed onto the bench opposite Halen and lowered his head onto the table. The wood was cool. He loved it. Tina brought porridge in thick clay bowls. It was gray, steaming, and smelled faintly of salt, oats, and practical disappointment. She placed one before Apple and one before Sebastian. Apple stared at it. The porridge stared back. Sebastian lifted his spoon, then set it down again. Halen had water. Of course Halen had water. He sat straight-backed and alert, as though morning had treated him with professional respect. Apple hated him a little. "Eat," Halen said. Apple nudged the porridge with his spoon. It moved slowly, like a bog trying to remember murder. Sebastian leaned toward Tina, who had returned to the table with a jug. "Ale," he said. Apple turned his head with great effort. "Are you mad?" Sebastian's face was pale and solemn. "Hair of the dog?" Apple looked around. "Which dog?" "I will fight it." Tina poured ale into Sebastian's cup. "This one's weak." Sebastian accepted it with gratitude. Apple recoiled. "That smell is violence." "It is breakfast," Sebastian said. "It is yesterday trying to get back in." Halen looked at him. "Water." Apple took his cup and drank obediently. The water was cold enough to hurt his teeth, and good enough that he forgave it. Sebastian took a cautious sip of ale. His expression went first uncertain, then relieved, then almost noble. Apple stared at him in disgust. "You are broken." "Yes," Sebastian said, "but improving." False. The door opened. Mist and cold entered first, then Wynne. He stepped into the fabulous tankard as if the morning had personally pleased him. His black hair, his cloak hung well. His eyes were too bright for someone who had missed an entire night's sleep. There was, to Apple's deep irritation, a little pep in the way he walked. Not a swagger, worse, satisfaction. Wynne crossed to their table, glanced at Sebastian's ale, Apple's untouched porridge, Halen's expression, and smiled. "Good morning." Sebastian stared at him. "It is afternoon, so I have been informed." Apple narrowed his eyes. "You look alive." "Generally preferable," Wynne said sarcastically. Halen's voice was quiet. "Where were you?" Wynne slid onto the bench beside Apple, took one look at the porridge, and pulled Apple's bowl toward himself. Apple put a hand on it. Win looked down at him. Apple looked back. Win said, "Are you eating this?" "No." "Then defend it less." Apple released the bowl. Win took the spoon and began eating as though gray porridge were a reward for cleverness. Sebastian watched him closely. Too closely for a drunk man, or perhaps exactly closely enough. "You were with Etta," Sebastian said. Win lifted the spoon. "I said I was going to Etta all night." Win ate another bite. Sebastian leaned back slowly. "Ah." Apple looked from one to the other. "What is ah?" "Nothing," Win said. Sebastian's mouth curved despite the hangover. "Not nothing. It is not your business." Sebastian lifted his cup. "A gentleman does not pry." Win gave him a quick, approving wink. "Nor does he talk." Sebastian almost choked on his ale. Apple's eyes widened. "Oh," Apple said. Win continued eating porridge. Halen did not appear amused. "What did you trade?" he asked. That cleared some of the smile from Win's face, though not all of it. "A blood garnet." Apple stiffened. "One?" he asked. "One? Which one?" "The lesser of the two with internal veining. Not the temple stone." Apple's hand went to the pouch at his chest. He relaxed by the smallest degree. "What did you buy?" Halen asked. "Not buy. Trade." Win scraped porridge from the side of the bowl. "A recipe, instructions, ratios, methods, mistakes to avoid if we prefer not to coat ourselves in flaming grease and call it strategy." Sebastian blinked. "Fire resistance?" "A gel," Win said. "Temporary protection against heat and flame. Not immunity, not comfort, but enough, if made correctly, to cross scorched ground, endure furnace wash, survive brief exposure, or avoid being crisped by whatever Blacklands nonsense Myrick has decided to cultivate." Halen's attention sharpened. "Can you make it?" "With the proper materials, which are several unpleasant marsh plants, rendered fat from something Etta claims is better unnamed, powdered ashglass, binding salts, and a fire opal." Apple stared. "A fire opal?" "Yes." "Did we have one?" "No, of course." Sebastian rubbed his temples. "Can Etta provide it?" "Not cheaply." Apple's mouth tightened. More gems. Win looked at him. "Probably." Apple looked down at the table. The porridge bowl was gone. Win had taken it. That somehow felt related. "I know," Win said. Apple hated when he did that. "No, you don't. I know enough. You like spending them." Win set the spoon down. "No," he said. The simplicity of it made Apple look up. Win's eyes were clear, tired now under the brightness. Whatever had put the pep in his step had not erased the cost beneath it. "I do not like spending them," Win said. "I like staying alive. I like you staying alive. I like Halen not having to carry us away in pieces. I like Sebastian surviving long enough to embarrass himself in more inns. These preferences are expensive." Sebastian raised his cup. "I accept my role in the argument." Apple looked away. Halen's gaze remained on Win. "And Etta?" Win's expression shifted. "Etta is dangerous," he said. "Skilled, regretful in some directions, not in others. She knows more than she says and less than she wants us to think. She also knows Myrick's interests were not abstract." "What else did she tell you?" Halen asked. "A little about ashglass, a little about heat-grown substances, a little about the so-called egg. Less than I wanted, and more happened," Sebastian said. Win glanced at him. Sebastian's eyes had a drunken gleam of triumph. "There is more to the story." Win took Sebastian's untouched porridge this time. "There is always more to the story." Apple's jaw dropped. "You took his too?" "He was drinking ale at noon. Sebastian surrendered the bowl without resistance." "A real gentleman does not talk, apparently." "A real gentleman also eats his porridge before someone else does," Win said. Tina passed close enough to hear, and slapped another empty bowl down in front of Apple without stopping. "For the small one," she said. Apple looked at the bowl, then after her. "I am not small, you are from where I'm standing," Apple muttered something into the steam. For a brief moment they were only tired travelers in an inn, one hungover noble trying not to look hungover, one Samia suspicious of porridge, one Emberkin pretending not to worry, one warlock eating everyone else's breakfast after an unexplained night with a blood witch. Then the shouting began outside. It cut through the common room like a knife through cloth. The first cry was distant, somewhere beyond the door. The second came closer. "Help! Open up! Help us!" Chairs scraped. Tina turned from the bar. The door burst inward. Cold air rushed in. 2 Dunmere guards staggered through carrying a man between them. One had him under the shoulders, the other beneath the knees. Blood ran down the wounded man's side and dripped steadily onto the floorboards. The room changed at once. The drunk in the corner woke. The fiddle stopped mid-note. Someone swore. Someone else moved a bench out of the way. "Table!" Tina barked. The nearest patrons scrambled. The guards laid the man across a cleared table, and the table immediately became a butcher's block in everything but name. Apple was already moving. His hangover vanished under the old, cold clarity of danger. The man was middle-aged, broad in the chest, with a torn traveling cloak and boots packed with road mud. His face had gone gray. His eyes rolled beneath half-closed lids. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. His wounds were wrong. That was Apple's first thought. Not merely bad. Wrong. 4 deep puncture rents across the ribs, too wide for a wolf, too heavy for a blade. The edges of the wounds were crushed as much as cut, the flesh bruised black-purple around torn openings. His left forearm was mangled where something had clamped down and worried the bone. The leather of his coat had been scraped in long gouges, as if dragged under something armored. Apple had seen damage like that before. Not exactly, but close enough. The altered things, the wrong-made creatures, the monsters that did not fight like animals because something had taught their bodies new rules. Halen reached the table first. "Move," he said. No one argued. The Emberkin placed one hand on the man's chest and one near the worst wound. The heat in his arms rose, not red now, but gold-white beneath the stone. His expression hardened with concentration. "Hold him," Halen said. Sebastian took the man's shoulders. Wynne caught one wrist. Apple climbed onto the bench beside the table and pressed both hands against a bleeding tear near the man's side. Hot blood slid between his fingers. The man convulsed. "Easy," Sebastian said. "Easy." "He is not a horse," Apple snapped. "He is also not easy," Sebastian said, but softly. Halen closed his eyes. The glow from his hands deepened. The smell of blood and burnt mineral filled the room. Not the stink of cooking flesh, something cleaner and stranger, like hot stone after rain. The wounded man gasped, back arching, and a few people in the tavern recoiled. Halen did not move. "Stay," he said. Whether to the man or the life inside him, Apple could not tell. The bleeding slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. The torn flesh drew inward by a fraction. The man's breathing hitched, dragged, then steadied into a ragged rhythm that still sounded terrible but no longer sounded final. Halen opened his eyes. Water. Tina was already there. She handed him a cup. Halen lifted the man's head carefully and wet his lips. The man coughed, choked, swallowed, and opened his eyes. They were wide with terror. "Wagons," he rasped. "Name," Halen said. The man blinked. "Your name?" "Barrick," he said. "Barrick Horn." "Barrick," Halen said, voice low and firm. "You are in Dunmere. You are alive. Speak slowly." Barrick's eyes darted around the room. "Caravan. How far?" Sebastian asked. 5 miles, maybe less. South Road, East Bend by the Split Oak. He coughed hard enough that Apple felt the wound shift beneath his hands. "Wagons broke. Axle first, then another. Ground soft. We stopped to mend." Tina looked toward one of the guards. "How many?" The guard's face was pale. "We found him on the road. Alone." Barrick shook his head weakly. "Not alone. They're there. Some were there." Wynne leaned closer. "What attacked you?" Barrick's gaze snapped to him. "Ground opened," he whispered. The tavern went very still. Apple's hands tightened on the blood-soaked cloth. From underneath? Halen asked. Myrick nodded. Not men, not wolves, not bears, low things, wide, armored. His breath came faster. Bear-sized but crawling, bellies near the dirt. Plates on them, like stone, like shell. We hit them. Blades skidded. Spears broke. One took Jory's leg in its mouth and... His voice failed. Apple had stopped feeling his headache entirely. Sebastian's face had gone cold and awake. Wynn's eyes darkened. Nearly impossible to hurt with ordinary weapons, Wynn said. Myrick turned toward him, desperate. Yes, yes. Steel glanced off unless you got under. But they were too low, too fast. Came from holes. Took the horses first, then the men trying to cut them loose. Did they eat the dead? Halen asked. Myrick's mouth trembled. They ate the living. Someone in the tavern cursed. A woman near the hearth began quietly crying. Apple looked at the wounds again. Puncture, crush, tear, drag marks, armor, underground. Myrick's work had not stayed in the tower. Or the tower had never been the point. How many attackers? Sebastian asked. 3, no, 4. Myrick's eyes squeezed shut. Maybe more under the road. We heard them, scraping. Beneath us. Survivors? Halen asked. Some climbed a wagon, some ran into the trees. A child under the grain cart. His eyes opened, wild. There was a child. Little girl. Red hood. She hid. I told her, stay quiet. Halen stood. The decision had already been made inside him. Apple saw it before he spoke. Get your gear, Halen said. Sebastian nodded once and moved. No complaint, no hangover, no ale softness. He was already fastening his sword belt tighter. Apple jumped from the bench, wiping blood from his hands onto a rag Tina threw him. Wynn rose with him. Tina stepped into Halen's path. You're going? Yes, those things came from under the road. Then we will watch the ground. That is not enough. No, Halen said. But it is where we begin. Tina held his gaze, then jerked her chin toward the stairs. Your packs are where you left them. I'll send Orin for the village guard. We cannot wait for a muster, Sebastian said. I didn't ask you to. Tina looked at him sharply. I'm sending them after you. Sebastian nodded. Good. Apple was already halfway to the stairs when he stopped and looked back. Myrick lay on the table, pale and shaking, one hand gripping the edge as though the road might still pull him under. Halen had stabilized him but not healed him whole. There was no time for whole. Apple touched quiet bite at his hip. The little crossbow suddenly felt less like a purchase and more like a warning. Wynn came up beside him. Bear-sized, Apple said. Armored, Wynn added. Underground, yes. Apple looked at him. Do you have any clever remarks? Wynn's face was grim. No. That frightened Apple more than the wounds. They ran upstairs. By the time they came back down, the fabulous tankard had become a command room by accident. Tina was shouting orders. One guard had gone for help. The other stood beside Myrick, pressing cloth to the wound under Halen's direction. Patrons had cleared space. Someone was filling water skins. Someone else brought a coil of rope. Sebastian buckled on his repaired armor with hard, efficient motions. Halen slung the potion case across his body. Wynn checked the small packets and vials he had acquired from Etta, his expression sharp with thought. Apple loaded quiet bite with his hands steady, and his stomach cold. Tina thrust a wrapped bundle at Halen. Bread. Dried meat. Don't argue, I was not going to... Smart. Sebastian looked at her. Something of last night's foolish admiration flickered, but the road had already taken most of the drink from him. Thank you, he said. Tina pointed at him. Come back alive before you try looking pretty at me again. Despite everything, Sebastian almost smiled. I will make the attempt. Make a better one than that. They stepped out into the wet, gray afternoon. Mist crawled low over Dunmere's plank walks. The village had heard the shouting now. Doors stood open. Faces watched from windows. Somewhere a bell began to ring. Not fast enough for fire, not slow enough for prayer. South Road, East Bend, Split Oak, 5 miles, a broken caravan, a child under a grain cart. Apple tightened the strap across his chest until the reinforced gambeson pressed hard against his ribs. He could feel every stitch Wynne had placed there, every layer meant to argue against the world. Halen started down the road at a hard pace. The others followed. Behind them, Dunmere's smoke rose steady into the mist. They reached the caravan before sunset. The road led them west out of Dunmere, away from peat smoke and warm tavern noise, into a low stretch of country where the bog pressed close on one side and the trees leaned hard from the other. The mist thinned as the afternoon drained away, but it never left entirely. It clung to the ditches and pooled between roots. It made the road ahead look half drowned. No one spoke much. Halen set the pace, hard, steady, relentless. Sebastian kept beside him when the road allowed it, one hand near his sword, the other occasionally lifting to his temple when the last remnants of the hangover reminded him they had not been fully defeated. Wynne moved lightly despite the mud, his gaze often on the ground rather than the trees. Apple ranged ahead and back, low to the roadside, quiet bite at his hip, and both daggers ready beneath the loosened peace ties he had never retied properly after leaving Dunmere. The road told them before the bodies did. Deep ruts where wagon wheels had bitten too far into wet ground, a snapped axle peg, splintered wood, hoof marks stamped wild across the mud, then vanishing where the ditch swallowed them. Here and there, the surface of the road bulged strangely, as though something large had passed underneath and lifted the earth from below. Apple crouched beside one of those swollen places. The mud had cracked in a crescent. He touched it with 2 fingers, then lifted them to his nose. Wet earth, sour mineral, blood somewhere beneath it. Apple, Sebastian said quietly. Apple looked up. Around the bend the caravan waited, or what was left of it. 3 wagons stood in the road at broken angles. One had lost a wheel and tilted into the ditch. Another had its front axle snapped clean through, the bed twisted so badly the grain sacks inside had spilled into the mud. The 3rd wagon had been dragged half sideways, its canvas torn open and flapping weakly in the damp wind. Bodies lay where people had fallen. Some had tried to run. Some had not made it off the road. Some were not whole enough for Apple to know what they had tried to do. The smell hit next. Blood, open bodies, mud, horse fear, torn leather, the sour stink of ruptured bowels. The hot copper scent that had followed them from the fabulous tankard returned stronger here, spread across the road and soaked into the earth. Sebastian swore under his breath. Wynne's face closed. Halen moved first. "Survivors," he said. His voice was low, but it carried the full weight of command. They found them among the wagons. A woman with a broken leg and a shoulder wound had wedged herself beneath the rear wagon. One hand clamped over the mouth of a boy no older than 10. The boy's face was streaked with mud and tears. His red hood was torn down one side. The child under the grain cart, alive. Apple felt something loosen in his chest, then tighten again when he saw the bodies nearby. Another man lay against a wheel, breathing in shallow clicks. A crossbow bolt jutted from the mud beside him, unused. His hand had been crushed so thoroughly that the fingers no longer looked like fingers. Beyond him, an older woman sat against a flour sack, staring at nothing while blood ran from a scalp wound into one eye. "Halen," Sebastian said. "I see them." The emberkin knelt beside the man first. His hands glowed. "Wynne. Salve. Sebastian, keep pressure here. Apple, check beneath the wagons." Apple moved. He hated going under the wagons, hated the close dark beneath the bed planks, the hanging straps, the smell of spilled grain and blood, hated imagining something armored and low waiting underneath, still and patient. But the boy had been under there. Others might be too. He found one more survivor curled behind the broken front wheel of the 2nd wagon, a young woman with a gash across her thigh and both hands wrapped around a belt knife she had not known how to use. Her eyes were open. She did not seem to see him. "It's me," Apple said softly. "Not them." She flinched anyway. "Alive here," he called. Sebastian came to help pull her free. Halen moved from body to body, stabilizing what could be stabilized and leaving what could not. That was the worst part. Not the blood, Not the wounds, the choices, the way his hands paused over one ruined chest, then withdrew, the way his face hardened when he had to spend life-saving heat where it might matter rather than where grief demanded it. The woman with the broken leg clutched the boy to her. "They're gone?" she whispered. "Not gone," Halen said. "Away from here?" She shook her head too hard. "Around the bend. They took some, dragged them. We heard—" Her jaw clenched, and she looked toward the trees as if sound might return and finish the work. "We heard them feeding—" Apple's tail curled tight. Halen looked at Sebastian. Sebastian had already drawn his sword. "How many?" Wynne asked. The woman swallowed. "4. Barrick said 3 or 4, Sebastian said. 4, she whispered. Too large, too smaller. The big ones broke the horses. The little ones went under the wagons, low, fast, shells on them. Blades glanced off. Arrows broke or stuck shallow. One man got a spear into the soft place under the jaw, but then the big one—" She stopped. The boy began to shake. Apple looked away. "What were they?" Wynne asked. The woman laughed once. It was a dry, broken sound. "You tell me." The young woman Apple had found under the wheel suddenly spoke. They listened to each other. Everyone turned. Her voice was faint, but steady in the way terror sometimes became steady when it had used everything else. They didn't just attack. The big ones watched. The small ones went where we ran. When one of us climbed the wagon, they hit the wheels. When we stayed still, they dug under us. Her eyes flicked to the road. They knew where we stepped. Wynne crouched near one of the raised seams in the mud. "Tremor sense," he murmured. Sebastian looked at him. "What?" "They track through vibration, movement, pressure against ground." Apple looked at his feet. That was deeply unfair. Halen finished binding the man by the wheel, then stood. "Can the wounded travel?" "Not quickly," Sebastian said. "Dunmere's wagon will come," Halen said. "But not before dark." A sound came from beyond the bend. Wet, heavy, a tearing sound. The boy made a small noise into his guardian's sleeve. Apple climbed the side of the nearest wagon, silent despite the mud. He crouched on the top rail, then moved up onto the tilted canvas frame. From there he could see past the bend where the road curved around a stand of black pines. The creatures were there. 4 of them. The larger 2 stood in the road like living siege engines built low to the ground. Bear-sized, Barrick had said, but that was only half right. They had the massive bears, the stance of boars, and the armored backs of things that should have lived under stones. Their bodies were covered in overlapping plates, dark brown and charcoal black, ridged with mineral growths that looked almost like cooled slag. Their heads were blunt and wedge-shaped, their mouths opened sideways wider than seemed possible, lined with grinding teeth meant for bone as much as flesh. One stood facing the road back toward Dunmere, watching. The other faced the trees, watching. Between them, the 2 smaller ones fed. They were not small, only smaller, low to the ground, quick-limbed, armored along the spine and shoulders. They had dragged 3 bodies into the ditch and were tearing at them with a methodical hunger that made Apple's stomach turn. One would feed while the other lifted its head, listening through the ground. Then they would switch, guarding, feeding, organized, not merely beasts. Apple eased down from the wagon. "They are close," he said. Halen looked toward the bend. "Feeding?" Apple nodded. "And watching." Wynne's mouth tightened. "Of course they are." Sebastian checked the edge on his blade, though there was nothing wrong with it. "We cannot leave them." "No," Halen said. The wounded woman grabbed Halen's wrist. "Don't move," she said. "They feel it." Halen gently freed his arm. "Then we move with purpose." "That is not comforting," Apple said. "No," Halen said. "But it is what we have." They made the plan in less than a minute because the dead could not wait, the wounded could not flee, and the sun had already begun touching the tops of the pines. Halen would draw the larger creatures. Sebastian would take the flank and look for gaps beneath the plates. Wynn would slow, distract, blind, distort, anything his magic could do without shaking the ground more than necessary. Apple would stay high when he could, strike soft places when he could not, and keep the smaller creatures away from the wounded. That was the plan. Like most plans, it assumed the world had manners. They rounded the bend. Halen went first. He did not charge. He advanced, mace in hand, shoulders squared, ember light rising beneath his stone flesh. His steps were heavy enough to announce him to every listening thing beneath the road. The nearest large beast turned, its head lowered. The second turned half a breath later. The smaller creatures stopped feeding. For a moment, all four beasts watched. Apple felt the attention like cold mud up his spine. Then the larger two rushed Halen. They were faster than their bodies promised. Mud sprayed from under their claws. Their armored plates clattered against one another, a dry stone-on-stone sound. Halen planted his feet and swung his mace into the first beast's face. The blow would have shattered a man. It knocked the creature sideways, cracked one plate near the jaw, and did not stop it. It hit Halen in the legs. The impact drove him back a full step, stone feet gouging trenches in the road. The second beast slammed into his flank, jaws snapping at the seam between his thigh and hip. Sebastian came in from the side with a two-handed cut. His broadsword struck the creature's shoulder and screamed across armor in a spray of sparks. "Damn it," he snarled. Wynn lifted one hand. The air folded. A strip of shadow dropped across the eyes of the second beast like a blindfold. It reared its head, snapping at nothing. Halen seized the opening and brought his mace down on the cracked jawplate. This time something broke. The beast shrieked, a grinding metallic sound that made Apple's teeth ache. Then the road beneath Apple moved. He leapt, barely in time. A smaller creature burst upward where he had been standing, mud and stones exploding around its armored head. Its jaws snapped shut on empty air with a sound like a trap closing. Apple landed on the side of the tilted wagon, drew quiet bite, and fired. The bolt struck the creature near the eye. It did not pierce. It stuck shallow in a crease between plates. The creature turned toward him. Apple's mouth went dry. That seems unfair. It launched itself at the wagon. Apple sprang upward, caught a broken support beam with his tail, swung, and dropped behind it. Claws tore through the wagon side where he had been. The creature's head punched through planks, showering him with splinters. He drew both daggers. The second smaller beast vanished under the road. Not burrowed slowly. Vanished. The mud swallowed it with terrifying speed, leaving only a collapse of wet earth and a ripple traveling beneath the surface. "Under," Apple shouted. Sebastian moved without thinking, stepping off the road onto a root web at the edge. The ripple turned, toward Apple. Of course. Apple went still. The buried creature slowed. Apple did not breathe. His heart hammered so loudly he was certain the thing could hear it. Maybe it could. A tremor passed beneath his feet. Apple vanished into shadow. It was not Wynn's magic. Not exactly. Not something Apple understood well enough to name. He had learned in dark corners, alleys, rafters, holds of ships, places where being unseen meant being alive. He slid between the wagon's cast shadow and the gloom beneath it, letting the world misplace him. The creature erupted where he had been. Apple reappeared behind Sebastian, stumbling out of the shadow beside the ditch. Sebastian startled. "Gods! Move!" Apple snapped. The buried creature whipped toward the vibration of Apple's landing, too quick, too coordinated. It lunged before Apple could climb. Its armored head struck him in the ribs. The new gambeson took part of it. Not all. Pain exploded through Apple's side. He flew backward into the mud, breath gone, ears ringing. The reinforced panels Wynn had stitched held. Without them, the blow might have opened him. With them, it merely felt like dying was considering the matter. The creature came low and fast. Apple rolled under its first snap, slashed at the underside of its jaw, and felt one dagger bite flesh. Black-red blood spilled hot across his hand. The beast screamed. The other smaller one turned from the wagon and came for him. Apple tried to rise. His ribs refused. He crawled backward, daggers up, tail lashing. "Halen!" he shouted. The word broke something in the fight. Halen heard him. The Emberkin had one large beast half blinded and the other locked against his mace, its jaws clamped around the weapon's haft. Sebastian hacked at the exposed joint under the front plate, driving his sword in with brutal, disciplined strokes. Wind's shadows tore and reformed around them, confusing the beasts just enough to keep anyone alive. But Apple's shout cut through all of it. Halen wrenched his mace sideways, ripping it free with a crack of teeth. He drove one shoulder into the wounded large beast, shoving it into Sebastian's blade. Then he turned, crossed the road in 3 massive strides, and reached down. Apple had one heartbeat to understand. Then Halen seized him. Not gently, efficiently. One hand around the back of Apple's gambeson, one under his harness. Halen lifted him as if Apple weighed no more than a bundled cloak. "What are you—" "Blades out," Halen said. Apple understood. He did not have time to object. Halen spun. The world became force. Apple extended both daggers. Halen's strength turned him into a circling edge, a small, furious storm of steel and fur and blood. The first smaller creature lunged, and Apple's blades carved across its face, one dagger catching the wounded soft place under the jaw. The beast recoiled, but Halen carried Apple through the motion, pivoting hard, swinging him low. Apple screamed, not in fear, in rage, in release. His daggers opened the second creature's throat from beneath the plates. Black blood sprayed across Halen's arm and Apple's face. Halen reversed the spin and hurled Apple upward, not away, but over the snapping jaws of the first wounded beast. Apple twisted midair, landed on its armored back, and drove both talon daggers down into the seam behind its skull. The blades sank deep. The beast bucked. Apple held with knees, tail, and hatred. It slammed sideways into the road, trying to crush him under its own body. Apple ripped one dagger free and stabbed again, again, again. The world narrowed to seams, softness, breath, blood. The old lesson returned through his hands. You do not own a blade because you can hold it. The creature collapsed. Apple sprang off before it hit the mud. He landed badly. Pain shot through his ribs. He ignored it because the second smaller beast, throat torn but not dead, was dragging itself toward the wounded caravanners. "No," Apple said. He vanished into the wagon's shadow. Reappeared beside its head, drove one dagger through its eye. This time the blade went all the way in. The beast convulsed once and stilled. Behind him, Sebastian and Halen finished the first large creature together. Halen pinned its head with his mace while Sebastian found the softer line under the cracked jaw and drove his broadsword in with both hands. The beast thrashed, plates clattering, claws carving trenches in the road, then went slack. The last large beast turned to flee. Wynn raised both hands. The shadows under the pines lengthened. For one breath, the creature seemed to run through deep water. Its legs slowed. Its head swung in panic. Halen stepped into its path and struck it across the front knee joint. Armor cracked. The beast dropped. Sebastian came from the side. Apple came from below. Halen brought the mace down. When it ended, the road was quiet except for breathing. Hard breathing, pain breathing, the kind of breathing that counted survivors before anyone dared speak. Apple stood over the last smaller beast, both daggers dripping. His face was streaked with black-red blood. His ribs screamed with every inhale. His hands trembled violently, not from fear but from the aftermath of force passing through a small body too quickly. Halen came to him. "Apple." "I am fine. No, I am mostly fine." Halen knelt. Apple tried to resist being checked. Halen ignored the attempt, pressed 2 warm fingers near Apple's ribs, and watched his face. Apple hissed, bruised. "Possibly cracked," Halen said. "The armor helped." "Yes." Apple looked down at the reinforced panels. Wynn's stitching had held. That mattered again. Wynn approached, breathing harder than he wanted anyone to notice. "I will take that as a compliment in absentia to my tailoring." Apple looked at him. "You are not absent." "I meant from your gratitude. Do not ruin it." Sebastian wiped his sword clean on a torn piece of wagon canvas. His arms shook once, then steadied. "Everyone alive?" "Not everyone," Halen said. The words turned them back toward the caravan. The Dunmere wagon arrived just after sunset. They heard it before they saw it, wheels creaking, harness rings clinking, guards calling to one another through the dim road. Tina had kept her word. Oren was among them, 2 fingers missing and crossbow ready. 3 village guards came with him, along with a driver and a woman who carried a healer's satchel with the grim look of someone already expecting too few bandages. By then, Halen had done what he could. 2 more survivors were alive because of him. 1 died anyway. A man with a chest wound that had looked survivable until he began coughing blood too dark and thick to be ordinary. Halen held him while the life went out, 1 ember-lit hand pressed uselessly against the wound. The man tried to say a name. No one understood it. Halen bowed his head as if he had. The boy in the red hood would not let go of the woman with the broken leg. The young woman from under the wagon kept staring at Apple's bloody daggers. The dead were gathered as best they could be gathered before full dark. No one had enough cloth to cover them all properly. The bodies the creatures had fed on were left for last, because several of the living could not look at them without making broken sounds. Oren stared at one of the dead beasts. "What in the black roots is that?" he asked. "Work," Wynne said. Oren looked at him. "Whose?" No one answered at once. Then Sebastian said, "Myrick's." The name seemed too small beside the carcasses. Halen crouched near the largest creature, studying the plates. He had cut one loose with his belt knife. Beneath the natural armor, if natural was still a word that applied, the flesh showed signs of alteration. Ridges fused where they should have grown separately, scars along the spine too straight to be accidental, mineral growths embedded around joints in patterns that suggested intention. Wynne examined a cracked plate with distaste. "Stabilized," he said. Sebastian looked at him. "The tower creatures were unstable in places," Wynne said. "Wrongly joined, improvised. These are not elegant, but they are more durable, more suited to purpose. Burrowing, armor, coordinated attack, tremor sense." Apple swallowed. "You said that word before. It means they can find us by feeling movement through the ground. I hate that word, as do I." Halen stood. "Myrick was looking for materials that could make his work last." "Ash glass," Sebastian said. "Heat growths," Wynne added. "The egg," Apple said. The word made them all quiet. The Dunmere healer began loading the wounded into the wagon. Halen helped lift them. Sebastian carried the boy when the child's legs refused to work. Apple expected the boy to be afraid of him. Instead, the boy reached out and touched Quiet Bite with 2 fingers. "Did you kill them?" he whispered. Apple looked at the dead creatures, then at the bodies. "Some," he said. The boy nodded solemnly, as though this answer fit somewhere inside his ruined day. When the wounded were secured, Oren approached Halen. "We can take them back," he said. "Tina said if you needed help, we were to help." "You have," Halen said. Oren looked down the road beyond the bend. "You coming back with us?" The question should have been simple. Apple wanted the inn. He wanted warmth. He wanted his ribs wrapped, sugar cubes, porridge he could refuse, a bed Halen would not kick until a reasonable hour. He wanted to sit in Dunmere until the road apologized for existing. But beyond the bend, the tracks continued. Not wagon tracks. Not quite. Marks in the mud where armored bodies had dragged low to the ground. Bulges where something had traveled under the road. And farther still, the road turned toward darker country. Toward the Black Lands. Toward Cinderist, if Edda's hints and Myrick's materials formed the shape Wynne thought they did. Halen looked at the party. No command this time. A question. Sebastian answered first. "If we go back, we lose the trail." Wynne nodded. "And now we know what kind of trail it is." Apple touched his ribs and winced. "I dislike this trail." "No one likes this trail," Wynne said. "That does not make me like it more." Halen's gaze stayed on Apple. "You are hurt." "I am always hurt. That is not a plan." Apple looked toward the wagon, toward the boy in the red hood, toward the covered shapes in the road, then toward the darkening east. "No," he said, "but Myrick is—" Halen held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. Oren understood before anyone said it plainly. His face tightened. "You're staying out here?" "For tonight," Halen said. "Then onward." The road skirts Grim Hollow, Orin said. Bad country. Wynne gave a faint, humorless smile. How refreshing. We were worried it might improve. Orin ignored him. You can follow the longer road around Grim Hollow's edge. Safer ground, more cover, old waystones if they haven't sunk. Takes time. And the shorter road? Sebastian asked. Orin looked past him towards the tress, where the last of the sun burned low. No road worth the name. Cuts toward the Black Lands. Near Cinderest if you hold direction and nothing turns you around. Ash pits, burn gullies, old heat underfoot, things that live where things shouldn't. Apple's ribs pulsed. Quiet Bite sat heavy at his hip. The gems at his chest felt heavier. Sebastian looked to Wynne. Can you make the gel? Not by morning, Wynne said. But I can begin. I have 2 fire opals. Edda's formula gives us a chance. Halen's jaw tightened. Then we rest here for tonight and leave at first light. Long road around Grim Hollow, Sebastian said. Or the cut toward the Black Lands, Wynne said. Apple looked down at the dead beast nearest him. Its armored plates had cracked under Halen's mace. Its blood steamed faintly in the cooling air, black-red against the mud. It had not been wild, not entirely. Someone had made it better at killing, then let it loose on a road where children hid under wagons. Apple drew 1 dagger and wiped a remaining streak of blood from the blade. The longer we take, he said, the more time Myrick has... No one answered. Because he was right. This is the end.